Hey, welcome back, everyone. Back to back episodes. Like we said, we're gonna do it like Drake, and we're back and doing it like Drake, and we're we planned on having a policy discussion, as I said yesterday, to go more deeper into the Nordic
The
policy.
Nordic model.
Yeah, and we wanted to go over that, which we will still do, but we got to take 10 minutes to take a moment of acknowledgement. To President Trump. No way to say that. Your boy has been indicted
Our
again.
fearless leader. Just kidding.
Jesus, man, he's been
Uh,
indicted. I mean, like this guy is he's winning, like he always says.
yeah.
Man, he's been. I think he's like a trifecta. Been indicted locally, been indicted by the state. Now he's going feds. He's been indicted by the feds. This is breaking news, guys. So I'm gonna break it to you guys. It's not a much on here, so I'm gonna go with what's been reported already, and then from there we can chime in on our perspective and what our thoughts are on it. But so Trump has been indicted on charges related to classified documents. Um, that's a very serious charge, and it's a very bold charge because anyone that does well, everyone should know this. The president has like one of the ultimate and highest clearances in government. I don't. It's very. I don't think anyone has a higher clearance than the president. And the clearances go past the president. It doesn't just stop it. Once the president gets out of office, he still has that same clearance. Matter of fact, a lot of our past presidents gets a lot of briefings from current presidents about what's happening because obviously they have that clearance to talk about that. And just for all you guys don't know, Trump took some classified documents when he left the White House. Apologize. Jesus, I'm in Texas de Brazil and I just ate so much steak and I'm so tired. But no, back to what I was saying. So yeah, so the Trump has been indicted 7 counts based on classified documents being taken
What are the
without
7 counts?
authorized permission. All right, so they don't have the 7 counts on here. They're just saying that
It's too new.
it's too new because all this is being reported by Trump himself.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that's true. I've seen that.
Yeah, so it's not something that we have BIA like a third independent source. It's all about Trump, who said it. It looks like here the FBI sees more than 100 documents on August 8th, and the box will voluntarily return to National Archives and Records Administration. Whatever record he took must have been pretty damning. So,
Yeah. I remember when this initially came out, like the first charges, a lot of people were talking about how it was related to like nuclear documents and I don't know, his ties with Saudi Arabia. So maybe that's kindly finally coming to fruition because there's obviously links between Jared Kushner and Saudi Arabia. We know
mm,
he's taken home like $2 billion or something. We don't know exactly why.
mm.
So we'll at least see we'll at least see what the indictments are actually for because it's hard to say at this point.
Yeah, I
How is
mean,
this charge any different than the first one?
well, these are federal charges.
Oh, because it was New York at first. I see.
It was New York. Yeah, these are federal charges,
So a lot
and
more
they're
serious.
a lot more serious because when the feds got you, they really got you.
Yeah.
It's usually states. States can throw charges, cities can throw charges, but they're usually just guessing. Usually, federal governments they do months and months and months of investigation before they
Yeah.
indict someone, um, and so that means they thoroughly looked at it and it was like, yeah, there's enough for we think we can get
Yeah.
a judgment, and that's usually why feds bring indictments because they're not going to bring indictments that they can't actually prosecute. So,
In theory, could he be like barred from running for president?
um, he is like the constitutional like book. Like everyone, he's posed so many constitutional questions since he's decided to run. Um, back in 20
20
2016.
2015,
Yeah,
2016. Yeah.
yeah, 2015, 2016. That I don't know if he can if he be barred. I
Because
don't
that
know.
would shake up the Republican primary for damn sure.
Yeah, because technically he wouldn't be. It's so weird because technically the trial would take like 18 months. They indict.
Um,
Okay, so they indicted him. Great, but that doesn't mean the hearing is going to take place anytime soon.
yeah, that's
It'd be
true.
like 18 months before he even goes into office. But if he's in office,
He'll get impeached immediately again.
it's a federal crime. He can pardon himself.
Can you pardon yourself? I don't think that you can. Can you? I thought
There's
that
no
was like a
rules.
whole thing where Trump was talking about pardon himself, and everybody was.
Well, you
I,
can't pardon yourself for future crimes you haven't committed. So that was what he was trying to do. And it's like, can't do that. But,
regardless, no president should be able to pardon themselves. That's ridiculous. If
well,
you're a criminal,
that's the power of the presidency.
yeah,
It's like, well, I pardon myself if I'm found guilty.
that seems like a checks and balances flaw. If that's true,
I think if he gets elected, the federal government would just drop the case altogether because they're not going to arrest the president and he can pardon himself. So it's a moot issue.
that's crazy.
This whole thing is crazy. It's like,
Yeah,
this whole thing is like, I don't even know. Like,
and we know he's done so much worse things that if there was more evidence, he would definitely be in prison. But it's tough because it's like this is the stuff that we got, so it doesn't look great to Republicans if it's not super substantiated, or I don't know if it's not super explicit.
well, he
Then
does a good job of showing that. He does a great job of showing. Well, not showing, but kind
pushing
of
back
giving a
essentially.
narrative.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pushing a narrative where this is all a witch hunt.
yeah,
This is all people trying to get me back for what I did for you, the people. That's how he's framing it. And so people, it's hard for because it plays a factor. I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm a lawyer, so the courtroom is about laws and facts and sticking to it in the courtroom, but there is media pressure that sometimes happens in certain cases that will affect that those decisions because everything's political. One thing I always tell people when I meet them, it's like nothing you ever do in life does not involve politics. Every single thing you do is politics.
yeah.
Like you're so
Politics is society. It's the way everything functions. It's the way the economy runs. It is really everything. When people are like, I don't like talking about politics. It's like
yeah, you do,
it's
but they're
everything.
political with their jobs. It's like they don't say certain things, so they know
Yeah,
they may rub off the boss the wrong way. They're being political.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's politics are in everything we do, and politics will play a factor in here because he's going to frame the narrative like this is a Democratic-led president with with FBI that is trying to come after him before an election. That's how he's going to frame it. His voters are going to accept that. That's how he's going to frame it.
yeah.
And if
It's
they
not going to
vote,
change the minds of a lot of Republicans, but I can definitely see some independents being like, he's got indicted twice, impeached twice. I don't know if I want to associate with this guy. I could see it helping in certain ways, but I don't know. It really depends on how he pushes his own narrative.
yeah,
It really helps how much he's not in the spotlight right now. Because I think if he was tweeting all the time, I think it. I mean, it depends. I think it'd be a lot worse for him because he says some dumb shit. People
mhm.
kind of forget how stupid he is because of how much or his nobody's on what is Truth Social. Nobody's really known what's gone on with him in the last 2 years. So,
Well, his thing is he's a marketer. That's what he does,
hmm
and he knows how to market himself. That's all. I mean, that's always been his strongest card, and he's going to probably die with that card. Um, I don't know how he does this. I mean, he would pull, in my opinion, one of the greatest political upsets in modern history
oh, for
because
sure.
he's been indicted on the state on federal charges. The American people would have known that he's been indicted, and if he would get elected with that knowledge, that would be the greatest political story I've ever heard.
Yeah, I'm terrified of that reality because like Trump would do some crazy shit if
Oh yeah,
there's some some
Oh my
crazy
God,
stuff to get his revenge, and it would be super unconstitutional, and he'd just get impeached again, and I just
this
don't
would
want to have
be
to deal with that shit.
this would be to me the beginning of the end. Honestly, I hate when people go to like drastic things like that, but it would be because he would bring us back to a time where America is not a democracy anymore.
Yeah,
He would literally change that dynamic because he's literally saying that I'm more powerful than the congressional government, I'm more powerful than the judiciary, and I'm more powerful than anyone in the executive branch. I am the ultimate
mhm.
power because I can literally do all this stuff and people still vote for me.
He's without a
And
doubt the most fascistic
yeah,
president
that's
we've had since.
since Hitler. Only
Well, he wasn't
no,
our president,
I'm
but
not.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not calling him Hitler, but I've only seen Hitler pull something like that off.
Well, there's people like Putin. There's people right now.
No, but Putin's never been arrested, and
Hitler wasn't a president.
huh?
Hitler was chancellor.
Yeah, but you said Putin.
Yeah, Putin was a president. Hitler was a chancellor. You said Putin was never president.
No, I said Putin's never been arrested.
Oh, arrested.
Yeah, he's never been arrested and indicted on charges. Well,
Yeah,
not at least from my knowledge in Russia. Um,
that's not what I was implying. No, I'm just saying he's fascistic right now. We have dictators right now, and Trump praises them constantly.
well, I think Trump will be the modern dictator because
Yeah,
he literally can get away with everything and really not face any consequences. That will literally be the modern dictator of the American government. That's why
it's theoretical that he could be more explicitly unconstitutional and he could get impeached again and actually removed from office, but it would rely on who is in Congress. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he got reelected and he was the first president to ever be removed from office, but also,
they will remove him if he's elected. He's not getting removed.
well, it depends on if we have a majority. He can't really do
I
anything
don't
about
think
that.
Democrats will do that either. I
They did already. They tried twice. Why wouldn't they do
it's
it
something
again?
because it's something he did in office.
Yeah. No, no. I just mean
London.
like the stuff that he's theoretically going to do if he's
Uh,
reelected.
well, yeah,
He's
if he violates the law, then yeah, we should impeach him again, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm implying. He could theoretically get removed from office if he's I don't know,
Yeah, if
before he
he's
does anything crazy unconstitutional.
yeah,
And I do think that regardless, he's not going to have as consolidated of a base as he did his first term just because of the primary. So we'll see. I don't know. People like Mike Pence, people who are just blatantly calling him out on his anti, conservative, unconstitutional shit,
mm-hmm.
like January 6th and like trying to overturn the election, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. It's possible we don't have to have a dystopian future, but it's not very positive right now.
Yeah, definitely not. Um, Definitely not. And it's one of those things where I don't know. It's one of those things that it's we're living in history, so it's so tough to
Yeah,
see how the story ends. But the reality is that the ending is very scary. Um, because it has very the similar. The story we're writing right now is very similar to stories written in the past of how
yeah,
great nations fall. So I'm very worried about it, but I got faith. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a two-part system.
yeah,
There's people trying to keep it together, um, and we just gotta have faith in that.
yeah. Speaking of connections to Trump,
Mhm.
one of Trump's former presidential opponents has passed away, Pat Robertson. Are you
Yeah,
aware of Donald Trump's 2000 presidential run?
I was very quiet. Did he come in and come out?
No, he ran for president in the year
Yeah.
2000 under the Reform Party against Pat
Uh-huh.
Robertson, and he wanted Oprah Winfrey to be his vice president.
Okay.
He called Pat Robertson a Nazi while
Well,
he
okay.
aligned with Ross Perot and Jesse Ventura. He called for fair trade, ending the
Remember this
national debt,
election?
and universal health care, which is, come on, bro. Why couldn't you just stick with that part? He had to drop the universal health care part. Like,
He was
damn.
political about it. He's like, I'm a white man, 70-year-old white man. Where more likely can I get elected? In the Democratic Party or Republican Party?
Yeah.
And he said,
He said
it's a
that in the
Republican Party.
80s.
Huh?
Remember when he said that in the 80s? He's like, if I
Oh
were to
yeah.
run for president, I'd run as a Republican because they have the dumbest base. He said that, and it's true. We've seen it.
Oh my god. Um, I'm not gonna say Republicans are dumb.
No, Trump said that.
Yeah, Trump would say that. I'm not gonna agree with
And they
Trump.
are. Not all of them,
You know
but
what I noticed, and I'm noticing more and more and more that there are two segments of the Republican Party.
yeah.
There is a very racial, I think 30-35% are Republicans because they believe in white supremacy and Nazism. I do
Yeah.
believe that.
The white identitarians who just care about like their tax money not going to immigrants or like black people.
I don't even know if it's about. I really think that just straight up, we want an all white society.
Yeah.
This is what we want. I believe that's about 30% of the Republican Party,
Yeah. I
and
agree.
I do think 65%, honestly, just hates government. That's in
Or
my
they
honest
just don't
opinion,
like taxes. I
they don't
think
like taxes and they just
yeah.
hate government. And I think that's 65% of them.
And they're
That's the
politically
majority.
uneducated and they're misinformed by Fox News and the media. They distrust CNN, understandably. So
Yeah,
they're just reactionary. They just do the opposite of what liberals do. Even though
yeah,
that 60% constitutes the classical liberal
yeah,
part of the Republican Party, where they still believe, in theory, in free markets and free speech and that stuff. They just don't understand how it actually works in practice. So
yeah,
that's the real problem is misinformation.
yeah. And that's what I think. Like I said, more and more I'm interacting because in the a lot of the judges that I interact with, they're conservative, and I realize a lot of them kind of are in line with a lot of progressive things thinking,
Yeah.
but but they stick to those principles, like you said, that traditional principles. Like, yeah, I just can't be a Democrat though.
It's tribalism.
Yeah, tribalism. Like,
They're more
people tend
comfortable
to
with the
be
people
react.
they grew up with.
Exactly. So a lot of it is like, okay, whatever.
Plus, liberals have had a problem of marketing, of course, and they always market them, or they, in the early 2000s, it was big government versus little governments, and the liberals were like comfortable identifying with big government for some reason when it's not an accurate way of describing the political situation. And like, of course, why would you want to support big government? Big government's scary. We've seen it happen. So it's just marketing. It's like,
Just
we see
marketing.
we see in reality who is the big government party and who's the party of liberty.
Yeah, and it's like, I just I caution people that you think, oh, these people are Republicans and that they really believe. I had one lady. I worked a case where guy hired me. He's helping homeless people and stuff like that. And this lady wants him out of their area because it's like a residential nice area, like they make 6-figure area. And it's like, oh, we want him out. And it's like, well, you can't. It's his house. He does what he wants to do in his house. You can't tell him what to do.
Yeah.
But he's like, well, it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood. Those Karens.
Yeah.
And
The NIMBYs, not in my backyard.
yeah, and then so when you look at that, this Karen is using the government to put levies and code enforcement and calling code enforcement, and and I'm sitting there helping this guy out, and I'm thinking to myself like, man, this is big government trying to tell this guy how to live his life.
Yeah. They care more
How
about protecting their property and using the government to uphold state capitalist property rights, where they like, I don't know, zoning, stuff like that, where they care
exactly
so much more about the property value than building, you know, a housing program in the neighborhood to help with the
the
homelessness
homeless.
issue. But they're like,
Yeah,
ugh, can't let my property value drop.
yeah, and these people there are Republicans, but
Well, and there's a lot of Democrats like that in California. It's mostly
uh,
just rich people.
it's rich people. So when
Yeah,
you look at it, you're like, well, some Republicans are just contradictory because yeah, you hate big government, but you're using big government to tell someone how and what to do in their house, and it's like, so I just when Republicans say, oh, we're not about government, and you look at how to utilize government so much, and you're like, it's not true.
But here's the thing: what is government? Is government when we socially spend money to, do cash transfers and, provide public health care, or is government the state, the authority figure, which is, if you think about the actual representation of the state, it is
Hmm.
the exact things that Republicans want to preserve: the
Yeah,
police, the military,
yeah,
s- stuff like that, where they literally use the state threat of violence to push people to submit to their concept of law. When liberals are like, they want a form of government, but it's not big authoritarian government the way Republicans do. Republicans
mhm,
don't want to spend money, and they want to use or they just want to use the cops to force homeless people off of public streets and want them to, you know, adhere drug laws and arrest people if they find them suspicious, and the Patriot Act. And
yeah,
there's nothing really consistent about small government Republicans in reality, or at least, yeah, maybe I'm sure some of them truly believe in it, but
hmm,
like the Republican presidencies and legislatures have never followed through. They spend more than Democrats, and they maybe don't spend more, but they increase the deficit because they're not taxing. And
yeah,
like I discussed last episode, uh, it's the reason we have deficits is not a spending problem; it's a lack of taxation problem. You know what
okay,
I mean?
yeah,
Because the money's still in circulation, and if you spend all this money and give it to the military, and you spend all this money and give it to corporate subsidies and stuff like that, but you don't tax it because you're also giving the same people that you're giving subsidies to, you're lowering their taxes, you're going to have an inflation, inflation, and you're going to have a deficit problem because the money is in the wrong hands essentially, and there's way too much of it in circulation.
exactly.
So the real question is, how do we solve this issue?
Okay,
And we have some really good models, around the world of countries that do a lot of programs efficiently. And it does require a lot higher rates of taxation, but it's like, you can't it's not just taxation is good, because taxation that goes to bad things is bad. It's pretty blanket. But if
yeah,
you use money to invest in workers, invest in ways to grow the economy, then it doesn't matter that you're spending money, because you're growing the pool of money. You're growing your GDP, you're growing the
hmm,
working class and their purchasing power. It all depends on how you spend the money and who has wealth and power in society.
yeah,
And like I said in the last episode, we would be a lot better if we had a lot more people who can invest their money in the companies that they want to be successful. The thing about a market is the market is supposed to dictate value in society, and which companies are good and which companies are bad. And if
yeah,
you have the richest 1,000 people making all the investments, then all you're going to see is companies that are super profitable, not companies that are valuable or contribute to society necessarily. So we just end up
yeah,
with a bunch of companies that turn over profits, not companies that innovate and add things to your lives. So we
yeah,
want the people to be using the market, consumers deciding what's valuable and what companies should succeed and what companies should fail. So
exactly.
how do we reduce wealth inequality?
Well, for us, I mean, how do we reduce wealth inequality is by adopting systems that addresses those disparity in wage gaps.
Yeah.
I think we talked about yesterday discussing the Nordic system and how they've had programs establishing to address those wage gaps
Hmm.
by investing in their by taking investments into their businesses, and then having those businesses provide a dividend to its people provides is for me a more monetary asset to kind of decrease the wage gaps between the haves and have nots. And so for us, I think that's what we need to look at. I mean, how do we address the disparities? And we have all the top 100 countries in the world are in America, but
Yeah,
then we have one of the lowest poverty rates. Well, let's see what the American poverty rate.
the American poverty rate is roughly like 17%. It's in that range, plus or minus 2% maybe, but it's not. I don't know where it ranks compared to the others, but I know which countries rank above them, and it's countries that, I mean, that actually care about reducing poverty. The United States has an issue where they're not trying to fix the issue of poverty and wealth inequality. They're just trying
Hmm.
to, subsidize like the very end of the very end of the issue. If you were like, let me think of how to phrase this. Like the way they're means testing programs,
Yeah.
they're not doing it. All right, let me start over.
Hmm.
The United States wastes so much money on administrative costs because we means test all of our welfare programs. And that's also part of the reason why conservatives have such a strong rhetoric against us giving out welfare, because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you want to give money specifically to people who aren't going to work hard and they're not contributing to society, when the Nordic countries don't have the same kind of anti-welfare propaganda because they have universal programs. They have programs that apply to every single citizen. So if you're a conservative, then you can't just say, "Oh, my money is going straight to poor people," because you're getting the benefits as well, even if you don't need the benefits.
Hmm.
So it's a lot easier to feel like you're in it together and you're not creating such a class divide. The concept of Marxism is fundamentally that we have a class issue where there's the proletariat, which was the working class, essentially the employed people in society, have completely different material interests and political interests than the people who own the means of production, the really wealthy people who own shares.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, the rich people are always going to push policies that are against the benefit of the rest of us because they don't have the same interests. Their
They
interests
don't.
are
Yeah.
specifically in not paying taxes, consolidating wealth, using that wealth to invest in having ease of business. When for a more majority of Americans, that stuff doesn't matter to them because they're just trying to pay their bills. They're just trying to get a better job so they can reduce the debt in their personal lives and try to advance their own education, which is cost buried.
Yeah.
So there's so many issues where we would be a lot better off if we had the same issues in society, and we would have a lot more consensus if the
Hmm.
people in society had the same issues. We're not trying to fight against each other, and we don't have such a disparity of power where the wealthy
Yeah.
people actually can control legislation because of how much wealth and power they have, and in the state which gives the power to the employers. They don't. There's no inherent reason why, if there's an employer and 10,000 employees, why the government should protect the right of the employer when
Yeah.
that's not an inherent concept. That's something that the government in our country decides that their property rights, their definition of what's more
Well,
valuable.
I think our country was founded on these principles of. Um, I take that back. It wasn't really founded on that. I think it became the business community hijacked it, really the country after the Great Depression. It was just, the Great Depression happened, and all these major corporations popped up when the food industry popped up, the technology industry boomed, the the
Well, there's
mechanical.
there's some there's also a giant problem with business interests in the early 1910s and 1920s.
Hmm.
Like obviously that's when the giant monopolies controlled everything. The Rockefellers, where they would have conglomerates of companies that owned other companies that owned other companies that all stem
Yep.
from the same shareholders, you know. And Teddy Roosevelt initially did something about that, and he
Yeah.
did trust busting and antitrust laws, and then we had another period of Republicans who took over: Calvin Coolidge, Warren Harding,
Mm-hmm.
Herbert Hoover. Just those are three Republican presidents who only deregulated policies, and they just gave so much money and power to the wealthiest people that it led to stuff like the Dust Bowl, where there wasn't farm regulations, and
Yeah.
we had the farmers would plant. They wouldn't take a break in between like their crop. So
Yeah.
essentially, they would overuse the soil that the that and they didn't like. I think I don't know exactly about farming, but I know that you're supposed to like take a time off so that the soil can like rejuvenate itself or whatever. But since they were trying so
Yeah,
hard
like
to
it.
just
Oh, okay, so then they didn't allow the land to breathe a little bit, right? So
exactly,
it was just kind of like constantly doing like
they were
farming on it.
constantly trying to use the same soil to get all their yield, and then we had like years and years of completely fruitless land. Of That's why they called it the Dust Bowl. We had such a crop or an issue of lack of agriculture,
Yeah.
and that we had such a food shortage. And
Yeah.
there's obviously the banking problems, all the
Mm-hmm.
sort of stuff that FDR had to fix once our entire society collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a couple decades of solving that problem, and then we went right back to a neoliberal policies. I mean, the '50s Republicans were definitely corporatist, but at least the employees still had a better share of the product that they produced, and
Mm-hmm.
we actually had a strong middle class.
They're like, so one of the biggest companies at that time was like Henry Ford. I don't know if Henry Ford did they give their workers like shares of the company?
I
I'm
don't
not
think they
sure.
gave them shares, but
Okay.
there was a thing where Henry Ford is famous for he initially he would pay his employees more than the market share because he
Okay.
realized that if his employees weren't making enough money to buy his cars, that he was actually losing money, and
Yeah.
he would actually make a lot more profit in turn if his employees would use the money that he paid them to invest in their own cars, so that he would
Mm-hmm.
just get that money back. So there was I don't know, there's reasons why capitalists had an incentive at that time to do stuff like that. But we've
So
just moved farther and farther
my
into.
question is,
Yeah,
when
go
did
ahead.
capitalism lose its way? When did it become when did it become the point of mass profits, no benefits to the workers, um, disparity in upper management and lower management wages, great disparity. There's always been disparity, but great disparity. I think
Well, if you look at the
I told you
numbers
that
and
question.
graphs,
Yeah,
it's pretty clearly it was in the 1970s.
like in the '70s. That's when
Yeah,
the tide turned.
which we had Kennedy, we had LBJ in the 60s, and they did a lot for the working class. And
Mm-hmm.
Nixon did a lot of bad crap, and so did Gerald Ford.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter wasn't great either. That's the problem. We didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
and then we went straight from the '70s, where the capitalism was starting to be a downturn, to
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Reagan seeing, oh, capitalism's not working exactly how we want it to. We need trickle down economics. That's when wealth inequality went to astronomical levels,
Yeah.
because he was just direct. I think our top marginal tax rates were at like 70%, maybe 90% in the '50s. The very top tax rate, which is, if you know, it's their tax brackets. It's not like rich people are getting taxed 90% of their wealth, but
No.
the top amount of money that they were earning was at 90%. Those numbers went down to like 30 30% or something, astronomically different
Yeah.
under the Ronald Reagan administration. So it's rich people got to keep more and more of their money, and it was supposed to trickle down, and they were supposed to invest that money, and it resulted in GDP growth because there was a lot more private investment in the United States.
Yeah.
A lot more company, or a lot more people around the world, wealthy people, saw the United States as a good way to make money. So we have GDP growth, so we have a lot more money circulating. That's why we have such a high GDP. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's not the poor people that get to see the returns on that. We just
Yeah.
have a
It's a
high
business. Yeah.
we just had a high, really, a lot of people were distracted by our high per capita.
Yeah.
Per capita, we're one of the richest countries in the world. But if you
Yeah.
have 10 people in a room, and 9 of them make $20,000 a year, and one of them's a millionaire, yeah, you have a really high per capita if you do the average and you average that out. But that's
Yeah,
not you're not a really wealthy room. You just have one wealthy person in the room.
yeah.
So the
I
United
mean,
States has been on a downward trajectory for a
in the
while,
'70s, right?
pretty much. Bill Clinton had the same problems because he cared a lot more about electability and about catering to the middle of the road voters that
Yeah.
he did.
Um, you broke up. You froze on me, Seth. 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 Well, guys, we lost Seth for a little bit. I'm pretty sure he's going to jump back on. Um, so it's kind of where Seth was leaving off in the 1980s and when Reagan and kind of issuing these new policies and President Bill Clinton kind of adopting his policies lightly, ushering a new kind of agenda for the Democratic Party. I think that the political cycle, kind of enabled the capitalism growth, but also was not enough mechanisms to bring in the lower class and the middle class up to the upper class. And so I think that kind of brings us where we're saying today, which is how do we find our approach to get us back with a capitalist mindset and a capitalist thinking, and then once we do that, have that capitalist mind, capitalist thinking, but how do we make it so that the lower class and the middle class has an opportunity to come up? And Seth wanted to talk about the Nordic approach and how they've used this approach of invest the public investing in companies, and then the public getting dividends, which we thought was a great approach. We've always talked about UBI being an approach that we like to address those disparities. Um, I also want to talk about other ones that I think that are pretty interesting. For example, I was a big time advocate of, having free college tuitions and student reimbursements because I think that those are the things that remove the crippling debt on our 18 to 35 or 40-year-old population and creates a new middle class. Because right now we have no middle class. And so by removing student loan education plans, I believe that that would inject more stimulus to the middle class and bring more people into it. And most people can afford houses right now, so that they can, start their families, afford a house, get a car. So that's what some of the approaches that we had. Gonna keep. Um, so that's what we wanted to talk about. For now, we're gonna cut it a little short today, as obviously Steph's having some technical issues. I'm gonna reach out to him. Let's see if we can go ahead um, and restart this. All right, thanks.
All right, we're back. Whoa.
All right,
We are
we got
back on the stream. We lost 8 minutes there.
yep.
I am sorry. My computer is not very good, apparently. Okay.
I definitely hear your music now.
Yeah, no. I turned it down. Turned it down. It's because I turned up my volume to hear you. All right, well, we are back, guys. Let's see. Anyways, wealth inequality, Nordic model, yada, yada, yada. Jesse was. I turned on the stream just to hear if you were even talking while I was gone.
I
Which,
tried. I tried to go a little bit deeper into some other. I said Nordic model is one way we can address equality. I also said student loan forgiveness, and I also said um, UBI and the Nordic model of
yeah,
distributing dividends to having workers, having public entities invest in corporations and get dividends to workers, which is kind of what the Nordic model talks about.
yeah,
Um, but then after that, I was like, good 5 minutes in, I was like, I haven't seen. I thought you would be back on by then.
yeah.
And
I was
so
working on it.
I was like, I told everybody, I was like, we're gonna take a commercial break. Let me see if I can get Seth back on.
Yeah, maybe the people needed it. It was
Yeah,
much needed. I don't know. We'll figure. We'll see if I can edit that part out.
you
It's good
probably
practice for
can.
me because I'm not good at editing the videos yet.
You probably can. I'll edit it out. And for people who are watching us live right now, you got the unedited version. That sucks, but it's cool because it's authentic. You
It's
know,
very authentic. That's our whole
very
thing.
authentic. And but the edited version that we probably drop would have that big 8 minute break gone. So now, I was talking about the Northern model, and we wanted to
Yeah,
dive deep into that, the dividends, and you were trying to explain that is essentially,
the social wealth fund.
yeah, social wealth fund. Is that? Can you explain that a little bit more about what that the Nordics do? I say
Yeah,
Nordics like it's a country, but the series of countries who
yeah.
adopt this model.
Well, Norway is the one that has the social wealth fund, and also
Yeah.
Alaska has their own version of a social wealth fund called the Alaska Permanent Fund.
So does it
Um,
have to be something where like it's under 23 degrees and below for that to work?
no, it seems no. It actually has more to do with oil reserves, and
Okay.
specifically, Norway has nationalized a lot of their natural resources like that.
Hmm.
You can't privately own the oil fields in the country because nobody can own land. It's kind of just you're either share it or you own it by imperialism and by or do we lose? Okay, you froze for a second. I got nervous.
Oh no, I'm here.
I'm glad. Now I have trauma.
It's got like drama
Well,
free.
I'm not necessarily. I'm not sure about nationalization. You could talk me into it, but and it doesn't. A social wealth fund doesn't necessarily have to be you know in using oil reserve revenue. It just happens to be the two biggest social wealth funds or most popular ones. They get
Yeah,
the revenue from oil and they invest that money
yeah,
publicly into companies, but the dividends are given by the people or given to the people instead of just
yeah,
the wealthy shareholders. The 1% of society, 10% of people own shares, and it, when it gets down to it, a majority of that 10% is 1% of those people. So we're just not seeing the profits in society. Essentially, everybody works for a wage, but at the end of the day, when a company grows, that growth goes into the shareholders' pockets. They don't share
yeah,
that growth. They'll use that money to reinvest in certain ways. They'll use that money to advertise, and then everything off the top they pocket.
yeah.
And it's like, what do you really contribute to a company? I mean,
You contribute a lot to a company. I
I'm saying,
mean,
what do you as a shareholder? You personally are not contributing to the money
well,
or to the company. Your money is. Your
yeah.
money is the
So
contributor, and you don't
I
need the person to be. So go ahead.
no, I would say that, for example, I had shares of Apple and I have shares of Disney, and I'm not gonna lie to you. Anything in my house, it's gonna be Disney and Apple because I
Yeah.
have shares. So I own a piece of the company, so I buy things that the company produces,
Hmm.
and I think that's how we contribute to companies and as shareholders.
I
I
mean, but
think.
everybody has Disney and Apple at the same time.
Oh yeah,
You know,
true.
you're contributing as much as any other consumer.
Yeah,
I mean, technically, you could be using your revenue to reinvest in the company in a way, but it's like
yeah,
it's a little. It's at least it's not as much of a contributor as the employees and the people, the engineers, the people that actually make make Apple products and
yeah, of
design
course.
them. They don't get a
Yeah,
share of that stuff. They're hired. When you
yeah.
talk about innovation,
Hmm.
you have a bunch of people hiring people to innovate for them, while the people that are doing the hiring get the profits of the investments or of the innovation. We have patent companies, companies that buy patents and copyrights, and they sell them to people who want to use those patents and copyrights to use artistic avenues. Essentially, we obviously know the music industry is super corrupt in the way that the artists don't get the same amount of share that they deserve from their music.
Of course, yeah.
Everybody, every industry relies on these wealthy shareholders to because they have all the money and all the power. So it's
Yeah.
like it's an endless cycle, and we're always going to have to rely on the capitalist class unless we grow the middle class, unless we grow the working class, because if all the wealth is in those hands, then we're always going to need that wealth to contribute to society. And the
Oh,
wealth is what we need. We don't need the capitalist class. And how do we get that? We can't just take that money. We can't take all that money. We can't just like do a wealth tax, and because those people have the freedom to leave. So we need to balance redistribution with
hmm,
investment and with you know the Nordic model has low corporate tax rates because they want to encourage investment in their companies, but they also have really high tax rates so that the shareholders who are invested in those companies, they still have to pay out a lot of that money, and it redistributes amongst society. And there's a lot of ways to do it efficiently with universal programs,
hmm,
but also there's just ways that people people don't have any choice in the costs in their life. Somebody who has a child has to have childcare.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And childcare is so unbelievably expensive in the United States of America. And countries like the Nordic countries, they have universal childcare, stuff like that, where it's paid for. So
yeah,
even if you make less of an income, which Nordic countries overall they don't make as high of an income as the United States. But the United States, all that extra income that we are earning, we have to spend on much more costs that aren't socialized, like healthcare,
yeah,
like childcare, like certain transportation, like all sorts of stuff like that. Which the Nordic model just like if everybody has access to childcare, then that's an entire cost we can eliminate from society, and that
yeah.
makes a lot of sense because it's why should people have to suffer for having children? That doesn't make sense.
No, it
Don't
doesn't.
you want those parents to invest in their children and be able to grow and provide a better future for future workers?
Yeah, of
So
course. You
so
want to
there's
be
stuff like
productive.
what was that?
You want to be productive and healthy.
Yeah, and healthy. That's another great point. The United States, we talk about all the money that we don't want to invest in our workers because there's so much money is wasted for no reason in the programs that we do have because of some ideological commitment to markets and capitalism,
Yeah,
which the conservatives hate Medicare and Medicaid. Well, some of them do. They love to talk trash about how much we're wasting on these.
they'll never put
Oh,
up a
oh,
bill or try to cancel it. You know
yeah.
that.
We need to, but it's like the way for us to reduce the prices is not free market capitalism. Okay. The
Yeah,
problem with Medicare is that we offer a blank check to pharmaceutical companies, to private healthcare or private insurance companies. And we say we're going to cover the costs for these. We're subsidizing them essentially. We're giving them the grounds to survive. We're
yeah,
giving the private companies. We're it's corporatism. It's corporate subsidies, and they have all the power and control over the pharmaceutical companies because we are giving them that right to control us. And it doesn't make any sense. It's not in anybody's interests. We spend twice as much per capita as every other of the Nordic countries, European countries that are fully developed economies. They spend half as much per person on healthcare. They have healthier people. They don't have people that are not covered, like they're homeless people with mental health issues. All the people who live in the streets in San Francisco, almost all of them have mental health issues,
Yeah.
and they are not they you we have commodified healthcare and mental health care. You have to have a job and you have to do this and that in order to cure you or give yourself care for like your schizophrenia. That
Yeah.
doesn't really make any sense. It's not equal opportunities. You're born with certain diseases and handicaps that prevent you from pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. People say pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, but you know that that's like an ironic term, right? Do you know your bootstraps are connected to your boots? You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps because you're standing on the ground. You would have to be levitating in the air to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's what's ironic about that phrase.
That is a pretty deep analysis.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't just fix yourself in an unequal society, one that doesn't give you equal opportunities. You need a certain framework, a certain base level, something like universal basic income, where even even if you aren't the most contributing person of society because of pre-existing conditions or some way,
Yeah.
you are still allowed to and live and pay for your rent and get a certain amount of food. Like we're not just going to allow you to suffer and die because you don't have a high enough market value, which is all that America cares about is the market value of the people.
Yeah. The most productive people. It's like
Yeah.
and reality, they don't realize that productivity is a construct of your environment. It's like I can be more productive if I have the
Yeah.
means to be more productive. If I
Exactly.
have, if I have to work 3 jobs just to afford healthcare, guess what? I'm not productive that much because guess what? My resources are being split 3 different ways.
Yeah, and you're not getting the sleep you need. You're not getting like the rest you need outside of work.
Yeah.
Like it's a proven fact that if we cut down to 4-day work weeks, we would have just as productive of people because they have more rest and they'll be more productive at their jobs. And
Yeah.
also, that's a really important thing is people don't want to be productive in a job that they don't care about. People
Yeah.
people want to follow their passions, and we have capitalism relies on you finding a job that's profitable for yourself, not a
Hmm.
job that suits you, that you would be most efficient in. If you wanted to work at a job that doesn't pay as much as a really well-paying job in a Nordic country, it's okay, and you can pursue that because you're still going to have access to healthcare, you're still going to have access to housing, and if like you lose your job, they have good unemployment programs.
Hmm.
So you don't have to worry about I need to have a job that pays me enough to survive. Otherwise, I will be on the streets. No, they're allowed to pursue what they want to do, where they're going to be most efficient. We have a healthcare system where we want to pay doctors so much money, so people become doctors just to earn money, not because they're really care about helping people or really care about yeah, just making people healthy, which is the role of a doctor. We want
Yeah.
people to perform their tasks to what the task needs, not just I need to clock in and clock out and make my dollars, dollar bills, y'all.
And that's the society we've grown into.
Yeah.
You know,
If we offered education to every single person
free
coming,
education,
yeah,
free
free
for regular
education,
free.
or even like really reduced accessible education,
Yeah.
or trade schools, we give people the resources they need to advance their market value, we would have
Hmm.
a much more efficient economy. We'd have a lot less losers because right
Yeah.
now we have a lot of people who are struggling because they're in misplaced jobs and they're alienated from their families, and they have to work more hours than they would want. because they are under a system where they don't have any control over their personal life. It's not a free economy
No.
because the government isn't regulating it or whatever. You want a economy where people can be free, you know. It
Yeah.
and there's ways to do that that require certain levels of government regulation over exploitation and over coercion. There's certain ways that the government can use government to make you more free, called like positive liberties. The-
Hmm.
Obviously, we need negative liberties. The government is not allowed to take away my freedom of speech. The government's not allowed to restrict me from doing this or that. But we need positive liberties too. We need the government to provide in certain ways. In
Yeah.
market failures, they need to cover things that capitalism can't cover. So there's a balance in government, and there's a balance between socialism and capitalism, and everything in society that's going to advance requires balance.
Yeah.
It requires a very specific mixture that dogmatism and you know black and white thinking does not fix. And that's one of the biggest problems with the duopoly that we exist in, is we have left and right, and we have all parties left of center are one party, and all ideologies right of center are one party. So that
Yeah.
everything you don't like, it's Democrats. Everything you don't like, it's the Republicans. Instead of like a sort of synthesis of ideas to
Yeah.
create the best result.
But that was the whole point in the foundation of the country, was for that to happen, you know? But it's gotten to the point where now it's becoming like people are not even thinking at this point. People are just saying, well, I have to be a Democrat because I'm black, or I have to be a
Which,
Republican
I mean,
because
the
I'm on the
Republicans
white
give you a
side.
lot of reasons to not want to vote for them if you're a black person.
I
You
agree.
might be more conservative, but you're not going to want to vote for something that even represents your values because it's split down the middle, left or black and white thinking. You don't you It's a tribalist country.
I agree. And sorry, I apologize. I
No,
just
I was waiting for you to say something.
yeah, I was saying, yeah, Republicans, even them, they like if you're an old white man, then somehow you're just a Republican without even listening to the ideas. And so we've gone to this point where we've become so tribal, like we were saying earlier, that you're not even listening to the ideas of the parties, or and you're just saying, "Well, I'm a Democrat because I fit this gender, I fit this
Yeah, certain
stereotypical
demographics.
demographic, and so I have to be this." But if
Yeah,
you listen to what the people are saying, you're probably not that, and that's where I think well, George Washington, cautioned people
yeah,
with this two-party system. He's like, look, it's okay that we have discourse amongst, ideas, but
yeah.
when the ideas become to the point where it becomes
Factioned.
factions and tribalism, and there's no idea of thought, or there's no conversations of thought, um, we die as a society. And he
Hmm.
he he foreshadowed that 200 years ago,
Yeah,
roughly around 200 years ago, and we're living it right now. So I 100% agree with you. I think that we need to get our politics back into the idea so we can start operating in the gray area and
yeah.
moving away from the black and whites.
the
You know,
the whites, the
black and
dang
white, the
whites.
black and white system.
I know. I'm just a smartass. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. I think universal basic income is a new concept for a lot of people. There's stuff like the negative income tax, where when you file your taxes at the end of the year,
Yeah,
if you don't make enough money, there's a certain standard, and you'll get paid the difference essentially. And
yeah,
there's and even right wing economists, if you've heard of Milton Friedman,
hmm,
advocate for a negative income tax. It's just sensible to not have people making less than a certain standard. It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of right wing people would around the world, uh, right wing parties support certain welfare programs like that. But in our country, we have such an inefficient government that it's very
hmm,
sensible for Republicans to not trust government. it is sensible. We're not very efficient. The tax money doesn't go to the people. It goes to the military industrial complex. It goes to
Yeah.
corporations. It goes to the ultra wealthy and powerful people. So why would you want to pay more in taxes or risk that when you're not going to get anything returned? You're already struggling to live as it is. Why pay more in taxes? So unless we have a system that gives you a return on your investments into the government and society, you're never gonna have uh, a a system where both sides can agree on anything.
100% agree. You're 100% right, and that's where we are. I think that's what we're working on. As what I would say, as the progressives, we're like, look, we have the better ideas, and we should
Yeah,
focus on that instead of you focusing on Democrat or all these marketing terms. But let's just look at what we're saying and compare it to what you want in your life, and you can see that the progressive message wins,
yeah,
and that's what I think we should focus on.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, this night was did not go as planned,
I
guys.
thought it went really well, other than the eight
The
minutes of
technical snag.
chaos and fear. I was like, no, my face is frozen on the screen. Oh no! I hope Jesse's talking because I can't hear anything.
Yeah, I was talking, and then I was like, Seth's been going a little bit too long. Let me come
I just
back.
had to pull up my other computer, and then actually, I'm back on my original computer. I had to delete some files because my memory was too maxed out or something like that. I don't
Uh-huh.
know. Every time I download one of these videos, it like maxes out my memory on my computer, so it sucks.
Yeah, well,
Yep.
we'll make sure we test it out next time, guys. I promise you that.
Yeah.
Um, so we're gonna shut off for tonight.
Yeah.
We're at the hour mark.
We
We're
talked
gonna
all yesterday. We covered the Nordic model and wealth inequality today, so
we're gonna
we can take a week at least off now.
yes, we're gonna try not to. We're gonna try to see if we can squeeze one in
Yeah, next week.
next week.
But I
We
am traveling. I will be going back to Michigan, so we will see. It most likely won't be Tuesday night, if at all. So we'll keep y'all updated.
Yep, we will. Well, guys, hope you enjoy your night. Hope you enjoy the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week sometime.
Hopefully, we'll have a guest set up.
Yes,
We're trying to get some big names on, and we have
yes,
confirmation. We just need to get some dates.
definitely.
So, all
All
right.
right, guys.
Well, thank you for another week of Imagine More,
See you next time.
and we'll see you next week. Maybe.
Okay.